Welcome to the session on global marketing perspectives from China's top 10 brands.
Let's welcome the honored guests here, Ms. Kathleen, VP of IDC, Mr. Paul Kent, VP of IDG World Expo, and 云华时代创始人郭鑫先生，以及来自中国石化、工商银行、建设银行、中国人寿、中国移动、海尔、京东方等中国领先企业的参会代表。
Let's welcome our honored guests here, Ms. Kathleen Schaub, VP of IDC, Mr. Paul Kent, GM of IDG World Expo, Mr. Michael Guo, founder of Kleine Intelligence Technologies and representatives from leading China companies of Sinopec, ICBC, CCB, China Life, China Mobile, Haier, BOE, etc.
欢迎演讲嘉宾云华时代创始人郭鑫先生上台演讲。郭鑫先生曾任全球著名跨国机构 Gallup 总裁以及 IDC 大中华区总裁，对全球高科技产业趋势、中国企业现状以及市场趋势发展研究具有深刻的了解和精准把握。欢迎郭鑫先生。
Now let's please welcome Mr. Michael Guo, founder and chair of Kleine Intelligence Technologies, to deliver his speech. Mr. Guo has served as president of international consulting research firms Gallup and IDC Greater China, and as a thought leader and influencer in Greater China ICT industries. Mr. Guo is recognized for his keen insights and strategic vision over the status and trends of high-tech industry developments in China. Welcome again.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As Catherine said, I'm also thrilled to attend this forum. Coming all the way from Beijing, my colleagues and I were in the time frame that is 12 hours different from now. So if you see me falling asleep, you know why. Okay. It is the first time for me to attend this very interesting FutureM. As the announcer said, I worked in Gallup as China country manager for 13 years, so I'm in the marketing side. I also worked in IDC as Catherine, as the MD for Greater China for 5 years, so I'm on the technology side. So I'm a combination of both. I hope this insightful short speech will help you to understand China, and also we come to learn, we come to share our points and also seek solutions for our future growth. As general Americans, you all have a dream. In the past 2 years, there's a buzzword in China said, we have a China dream. So China dream is also hot in China. And I got this picture from The Economist. Of course, this is President Xi Jinping, who is the #1 boss in China. But the picture says, let's party like 1793. 1793 is in the peak of Qing dynasty, the last dynasty before China moved to republic system. And that was a time I also took a snapshot from Economist when China's GDP was a third of the world, a little less than 200 years ago. And gradually, China's GDP came down until the late 70s when we said we were on the brink of collapse. And what made China moving up again in this past 30 years and where China is heading to? These are questions that we're also asking ourselves. I like this picture. As an IDCer, we like to quote from EIU unit. And this is what EIU says about China and also its contribution to the world's economy. And ever since 2010, China contributes to roughly a third of the GDP growth of the world. And you see, if you see this picture, really it is USA, Europe, emerging world, China. And this is the financial crisis when everybody was underwater. Only China remained above water. And ever since that, China had a nice V-shaped recovery and also leading since 2010 world's GDP growth until this day. However, if we look at China in terms of GDP, it's only a one-sided picture. We have to look in depth. What are those players, the leading players in China? How they came along? What roads are they taking from now? So this is also from, I think this is from a China report which was released only last month in China, says China Top 500 report, and says this is the percentage of Chinese companies who are listed in the Fortune 500. Those companies, excluding companies from Taiwan and Hong Kong, only mainland China companies. So you see, comparing with last year's, every country almost was very stable. USA, it's almost the same number of companies was listed in the Fortune 500. Japan, a little slide down. China was the only country that grew in this period of time in terms of the number which is listed in the Fortune 500. If we have a closer look, we'll see that China takes a fair amount in the Fortune 500, which represents a growth rate of, average growth rate of above 8 since the last few years. And also, if we compare the number since 1995, there were only 2 Chinese firms in that Fortune 500. And until last year, there were 86, almost 90 in that. But that is only one side, because we know Fortune 500 only measures size. It does not measure quality. And if we're comparing Chinese companies versus US top 500, we see China represents only part of the US. China's GDP reached about 7.9 billion US, almost 8 billion, but the United States was 12 billion US. So China was not, even though Chinese companies listed in the Fortune 500 is growing, but its actual size and contribution to that was limited comparing with the US. And I also took from EIU this picture. Immediately the year in 2009, after the global financial crisis, China had the most companies. Out of the top 10 in Fortune 500, China had 4, versus US had 3. But if we're turning pages over to this year, 9 out of 10 companies was from the USA. And China had only 1 oil company that lists in the top 10, which means China is growing very rapidly, but China needs to find a way to a sustainability to its economic growth. So let's say, even though in terms of size, China is gradually catching up and making a share in Fortune 500 companies. But if we compare per capita revenue, which means how many people you're hiring in terms of productivity, China is only 56% of that of the US Fortune 500 companies. If we see a profit, if we see in the profit light, Chinese companies in top 500 was even less. It's only about 36%. So this means our growth, the investment we've been having in the past few years was not having the best returns. Can that sustain? We had a debate in China right now. We want to invest in cash dollars, or we want to invest in productivity for sustained growth. And I would like to say, if we look at those companies in China, people know China as a manufacturing country, but this yellow line represents China's manufacturing sector, which is descending ever since the world financial crisis. This is a number, a report by Sina, who is also present today, by Sina Finance, China's major internet media, which compares a group of Chinese manufacturers listed in China Top 500, 268 of them, but their contribution to China's economy in terms of profits represents only 20%, while this red line represents Chinese banks, only 5 of them in that top 500 banks. The 5 banks contributed to 35% of the revenue growth. So this means, good or bad, China's manufacturing is descending. We need a new way of relabeling, categorizing China's competitiveness in terms of manufacturing country. In other terms, China's service sector is also growing, which is a good sign. But in other terms, are we having a potential haphazard of financial crisis after Japan, after European countries? So those were the questions that people were debating in China right now. And one unique characteristics for Chinese firms in top 500 is we see a majority of state-owned enterprises, which is very unique compared with Europe, which were private firms leading the economy. So government plays an important role in terms of leading China's economy, not only in terms of economic planner, but also in terms of economic runner who runs the economy. Okay. Having said that, let's have a retrospect of China's growth. Can we sustain that growth? This is a growth chart, the curves depicting China's growth almost in every 7 years. China's GDP doubles, which is true until the year 2008, which the world economic financial crisis came. And since that, this was the latest quote from the Economist, which says China's GDP growth will be coming down. Right now, during the 12th five-year plan, we plan our economy by 5 years. This is the last 5 years, more than 10% growth. And this is the present. And this is history, this is forecasts. To this year, we're forecasting about 7.5% GDP growth. And since that, for the next 5-year plan and the 5-year plans after that, China's GDP is descending. Is that good or bad? Everybody is debating. So our question is, how can we sustain this? How can we be an economic powerhouse of the world like the past 2 decades, 3 decades? This is a study I did at IDC 2 years ago when I left last year. This says if we have a model, we would rather take this model to say what the economy would look like in the future. I took a study from the Business Week, the 2009 Business Week data, which listed companies which had an asset of over 100 billion. Let's say if those companies in 2009, 2010, in a growth perspective, in a few years, companies would be growing into like that. So by this standard, we saw that there are 16 US firms representing 47%, Chinese firms representing 15%, almost the same with what we see for top 500 for the world's share for the economy. The interesting is the tangible assets firms or the service countries represents almost half. And manufacturing, those resource companies represents a half. So we say right now we're at a crossroads where the assets, the value for companies coming really from intangible assets, which is represented by information, analytics, brands, we've been talking about for the earlier this day. Then, this is this year's top 10 for China. If we are segmenting that, we see that ICT companies represents a major share in this. We have China Telecom, we have Huawei, we have Baidu, which is China's Google, a search engine company, and also Tencent, which is almost like a Facebook and internet social media company. And also we see China's service industry growing. We see banks, insurance companies coming up, which represented a 15% growth rate for banking in China. So after this, comparing the model in the last page, so we're very delighted to say that China's economy is really having a turning point from a manufacturing country, heavily relying on tangible efforts, heavily relying on cash investments, to that of technology, to that of innovation, to that of intangible assets, which is a good sign for this year. And I would also quote from a report by McKinsey, which talks about disruptive technologies that will change our life and also our business. Interestingly, the report listed two industrial revolutions. The Industrial Revolution took in about 300 years ago in Britain, and the Second Industrial Revolution happened here in the USA about 150 years ago. So right now we're entering, people say, the Third Industrial Revolution. How China would compete in that, how China would grow in a global company, a global contributor, and also having a competitiveness in terms of intangible efforts, in terms of brands. That is a question for us. And if we have a finer look at this disruptive technologies, we see they listed 12 disruptive technologies. Out of those 12 technologies, the mobile internet and also cloud computing adapts particularly well to emerging countries because let's say mobile internet, they have a 50% adoption rate. But if you see cloud computing, 70% of that would apply to developing countries or emerging economies like China. So this is a very promising technology that Chinese firms is holding. And the rest of my presentation will be talking about when we are moving. First, I would say about government, because China is still in a economic model transition from planned economy to that of market economy. We call that socialist market economy, which state-owned enterprises represents a lion's share in the economy, and also government plays a very important role in terms of planning and also in terms of implementation of those strategic plans or five-year plans. So from a planner's perspective, we see that in terms of policy, China's really encouraging innovation, encouraging, officially they say the convergence of industrialization and also with informatization. Informatization is an IDC word because you can't find that word in English. Informatization means really you play the roles on the platform of IT and you really having innovation as the backbone of your development. And also in terms of transition, the government really encourages e-commerce, the Internet of Things, smart city, and also transitions the information infrastructure construction. So in the next few pages, I'll be talking in that line, not only in terms of the government's efforts, but more in terms of those top 10 brands who is present here today. Let me quote Mary Meeker. I think that is a very good, interesting picture, say in China. Let's say e-commerce. Alibaba, which is an e-commerce company in China, surpasses the total of Amazon and eBay in the USA, which is a good sign. Then why Alibaba is not top 500? Because Alibaba is not listed. Alibaba, right now in China, we've been talking about BAT or BAT. B represents Baidu, who is here today. A represents Alibaba, which is an internet e-commerce company. T really represents Tencent. So we have two BAT out of 3. We have 2 representatives here. But Baidu and Tencent are listed company. Alibaba is not listed, but Alibaba is also performing extremely well. And everywhere people are looking forward to Alibaba and also studying their models. Having talked about Alibaba, then Alibaba is also proliferating into other industries, into the logistics, which sends the good you order from internet and to your home. And JD.com, in English named by 360 Buy, is a delivery company who also serves Alibaba and using that internet strategy and making a great progress together with Alibaba and also with the other e-commerce companies and seeing an emerging force in terms of innovation, in terms of China's economic transformation. And about 2 months ago, Sina Finance, a China's Bloomberg e-commerce media, published an article says, the technology will disrupt 17 industries or sectors in China. And those sectors were listed here, including retail, wholesaling, journalism, advertising, and manufacturing. People were talking about that. And if we see those, we'll see Chinese firms also quoting Mary Meeker for 2013 report. That this is talking about Tencent. The Tencent WeChat, if you ask every Chinese people, ask them to show their cell phone, they will show you a Tencent application on the first page. And this company, this application had only been in service for 2 years, but it had 400 million users. Everyone is using that. Not only consumers using that, all businesses using that. Banks, insurance companies, manufacturing, if you're tracing your customer, they're really using WeChat to trace their customers. So this is a very encouraging sign and very competitive scenario in China that a disruptive technology is used. A small firm, internet firm, grows into a major top 500 companies using that internet technology. So this is an interesting growth. Also quoting from Mary Meeker, the mobile handset users in China is also surpassing USA. That means more applications, more businesses using that to make their own evaluation of the business and also make their business model transformed from manufacturing to that of internet. So this is an application used in China for transportation, for taxis. If you see this, you can announce that to a taxi local in the vicinity. And also, this is, you can bargain a price with that. And also, you can trace where the taxi is. So this totally changed the picture of China's transportation or taxi business in terms of efficiency, in terms of improving the congestion in cities like Beijing and Shanghai. So very interesting, people were adopting that in China, who said that consumers are using that Weibo to learn and be informed about Beijing's air quality, which is also generates into a major drive of green environmental drive nowadays in Beijing to improve the environment and air quality in Beijing. And also, interestingly, this is the 7/12 last year when Beijing had a major rainstorm and people were stuck at the airport. And people were using Weibo to send private cars, fleets of private cars to bring those people stuck at the airport back home. So this is an interesting usage of internet by Chinese firms, major Chinese firms, technology firms, in terms of innovation. And we know that China is a major economy with the finance sector being its backbone. And interestingly, Alibaba, which is, as pity, is not a listed company, so it's not in the top 10, but that represents an interesting turn of China's finance sector. In China, we had a debate today. It's internet finance or finance by internet. Internet finance means those internet grassroots companies like Alibaba, like JD, coming into finance in terms of payment, in terms of clients' small amount credibility credit. And also finance by industry means those gigantic dinosaur state-owned banks, insurance companies, turning to internet to change their business model and serve the clients. So having said that, China is also in an interesting transition period where China's manufacturing, or the old business growth model, is transforming, is slowing down. In terms of China's manufacturing, is using more technology, is using more brand strategy by internet to chase their customers. China's banks is also turned online to transform their business model. On the other hand, China's private firms, internet companies, small firms, by using internet technology, by using innovations provided by IT, is also generating a great bulk of economic growth and GDP contribution. So in that term, China is really transforming, not only in terms that we see those companies from the top 10 that listed this year, but also in terms of other companies is also embark on the route of technology, innovation, tangible value-driven business model, which will transform China into an economy which is more productive, which is more environmental friendly, which is more global, which is more competitive. So in that terms, we would say, in that conclusion, that China is still today the world's economic powerhouse, but China is driven by a different route, which is different from the 3 decades or 2 decades ago when China's growth rate was double-digit. Though we're turning to a single-digit growth, which is in the 6 or 7% percentile growth rate, but China is more competitive by environmental protection, by turning its business model, by growing its economy, not only by investment, not only by building factories, turning out goods, becoming a world's workshop, but also becoming a world's lab, which is a China dream, which is gradually turning true. And also, the emerging technologies and also the policies laid by government of using or leveraging disruptive technologies is really disrupting China's old economic sectors and bringing in new economic sectors, not only for state-owned enterprises, but also for those emerging prices like BAT, like BAT, which I had talked about. So in the final analysis, we say that top 500 companies in China is already leading the way, but if we see the composition of those companies were compiled of mostly of service industries, mostly by internet-driven, IT innovation-driven companies, not only state-owned companies, but equally important private companies. So China's economy is really changing shape and color and also changing the way it grows by itself. So in that term, we would say that we send our congratulations to the top 10, which represents ICT companies, which also represents China's growth companies in terms of service industry. Though service industry is not a major industry comparing with the manufacturing, but it's growing very healthily. So in that term, we would say that China is and will sustain if we choosing that role. Thank you very much for your attention.